What is going on, you guys? My name is Cody Thixton, and this is an interesting podcast coming to you guys on May 27th, 2023 for episode 56, where today we actually have a very, very special guest. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's get right into this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Jackhammer.
Hi, Cody. Thanks for having me on. Really excited.
Oh, man, dude, it is awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Of course, yeah.
Well, all right, man. Well, let's just start out for all of the people that maybe don't know you, man. Like, introduce your name and where you're from and maybe how old you are.
Sure. So I wrestle as Jack Hammer. My real name is Kyle Hamlin. I am from Lincoln City, Oregon, which is on the central Oregon coast. Born and raised there, live there currently with my brother, Sledgehammer. And I am 33 years old now.
That is insane. That is so awesome. I was actually wanting to ask you how you and Sledge met each other. I didn't actually know that you guys were real brothers. I know that had, gotten brought up with somebody I was showing your guys' stuff with. And it's like, I had no idea. That is so awesome.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because we wrestled last weekend at POW, and the tag team that we wrestled, they didn't think that we were real brothers. We are. I'm the older one. He's a couple years younger than me. But yes, we are real brothers. And yeah, a lot of people are surprised to hear that because I think, the size difference, we don't look a ton alike. We never really have. But yeah, real brothers. Shocker.
That is insane. So it was like, how is it growing up with a brother that maybe was into pro wrestling just as much as you were?
It was great. Sledge and I, even though we don't look a lot alike, we're very similar. Our tastes in different things. Wrestling was one of those things that we both enjoyed. I got into it when I was really young. I can remember watching, early 90s WWF, Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man Randy Savage. Those are kind of the Undertaker was a favorite of mine when I was really small.
Yeah.
And then I think he just kind of, because I had it on, he got into it also. And we grew up wrestling each other a lot in the backyard on the trampoline. So that's kind of where we started to get that chemistry with each other. But it was really cool to have somebody to watch wrestling with. We used to order all the pay-per-views, and it was just nice to have somebody to talk to about it. There weren't a ton of kids that we went to school with growing up who were into it. We would have some friends come over and watch with us and that kind of thing. But we didn't really have anybody that we knew who was as into it as we were. So it was great to have a younger sibling there to kind of, experience it all with.
Yeah. So did you guys both enter into OPWS at the same time? And it's like, what was that moment where you both were like, okay, so this is something we want to do. So let's go out and let's actually try and do it.
Yeah. So a little bit of a backstory. I actually started wrestling before Sledge, and this was prior to COVID, would have been 2015. I started training at a company that no longer exists, and did it so on my own for about 10 months. But I trained, I wrestled on shows for this company, and I just wasn't having a great time. Some of it was that it was always my dream to do it with my brother, and he just was not ready to make that commitment at that time.
Yeah.
So I was doing it solo, wasn't really having a good time with it for a number of reasons, and then gave it up after about 10 months. And, had some regrets about that because I really enjoyed parts of wrestling, but there were certain things about wrestling for that company that were kind of making me miserable, frankly. So yeah. I gave it up. And then I guess it would have been around the time COVID hit. Sledge showed interest in wrestling. We were both living, we're living in Lincoln City and not really doing a whole lot, just kind of working dead end jobs. And he showed some interest in it. As everybody knows, Sledge is a big boy. So some of it was trying to get him some motivation to get in better shape. So we started hitting the gym and kind of preparing. And then we didn't really know what the landscape of indie wrestling in the Pacific Northwest looked like anymore, because I had kind of stopped following it after I had gotten out of it. And then COVID hit, and I had no idea what it was going to look like after COVID. But he showed interest in it, and I said, listen, if you want to give this a shot, I will do it with you. I'll give it another shot. And when COVID kind of started, we started to get out of COVID a little bit. I contacted somebody that I knew from before in wrestling, and things had changed quite a bit. I kind of got the scoop that that company I worked for the first time around was no longer in existence, and there wasn't a whole lot going on. There were some companies that had popped up in the area, but COVID had kind of derailed everything. So basically we needed a place to train, and I didn't know where we were going to go. I had contacted this gentleman that I knew from before about, what school I could go to start training again, to get Sledge trained. And he mentioned that Ricky Gibson was opening a school in Hillsboro, which is Oregon Pro Wrestling School. And he said, you should give him a try. So we contacted Ricky, and I actually knew Ricky from before. I had actually wrestled him once before when I wrestled the first time around solo. And he remembered me. We didn't know each other very well, but I wrestled him once and contacted him, and we decided to give it a go. And so we were kind of part of that first class of students, I guess, that started. I guess it would have been 2021. Time flies. I can't say but right after COVID, as COVID kind of started to, things started opening up a little bit, and he opened the school. We were kind of that part of that first batch of students.
Yeah, that is really cool, man. Especially like going with your brother and actually going in and signing up. And I know I had already asked Zay this question, but I also wanted to ask you, is like, how did it feel for both of you guys to like go and actually enter those doors and sign the contracts or everything that, pay and do everything that you need to do to get in? It's like, how did that feel? Did you have to kind of prep him a little bit before actually stepping into the doors?
Yeah, I mean, I was nervous. I had done it before with other people. It was a different school, different people, but I think we were both nervous. You show up, and I think they had been doing training for a few weeks before we started. I had been in contact with Ricky, so they already had classes going. They hadn't been doing it for super long. But when we showed up that first day, you show up and you hear guys bumping in the ring, and it's kind of a surreal thing. You grow up watching wrestling on TV, and honestly, we never really imagined that we would actually do it. It just seemed like something that was so out of reach. Like, we're a couple kids from a small town on the Oregon coast, and it just didn't seem like something that was plausible for us to do one day. So we were nervous. As far as prepping Sledge, I kind of prepped him on some of the etiquette, I suppose, which even that has changed since the first time that I wrestled. But there are some kind of interesting things in wrestling, just wrestling etiquette when you show up and go around and kind of shake hands and introduce yourself. And but even some of those things changed from the last time that I was wrestling. And some of it might have been that this company that I had worked for the first time just did things differently. But no, I think we were both nervous, but we showed up. I think we both, even though he had no experience wrestling and I had only done it for a little bit, we felt like we were pretty confident that we would pick things up pretty quickly. I know that I kind of felt that I sort of had a natural gift for it when I started the first time. And I think a lot of that is just because we grew up watching wrestling. We grew up practicing the moves on each other on the trampoline, which they tell you not to do, of course. Don't try this at home. We did not listen to those warnings. But no, we showed up and we didn't really know what to expect exactly. I mean, I had a little bit of an idea because of the previous school that I had trained at. But I got to say Ricky, all of the other trainers at the school, the other students, they welcomed us. It's been an incredible experience being trained there. And if anybody out there is interested in getting into professional wrestling, highly recommend Oregon Pro Wrestling School, because it's it doesn't matter if you're a natural or if it's going to take you a while to kind of catch on and get it. They are just so welcoming and so patient, and it's really kind of a family atmosphere there. So we've had a really good experience.
That is freaking awesome, man. Like, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I actually wanted to bring up something, just because you had like previously brought up kind of wrestling each other growing up, and I didn't really grow up like wrestling per se, like having somebody there that I could actually wrestle, but I used to wrestle my body pillow.
Sure. we did that too. Yeah.
And I used to put my two couches together and then take the cushions off and like make it into a mat. And I would go up onto the armrest and almost make it into like my top rope.
There you go.
And I used to sit there and do sentons. And I remember one time I had this awesome idea. I was like, hey, I'll like put my knee up, as I'm doing the flip.
Yeah.
And I went and I did the flip and my knee came back and boom, just punched me like right in the mouth. And it's like, have you ever had it where when you were training, like you had gone to do something and then maybe it mishapped a little bit and you kind of hit yourself like a little bit more hard than you had actually expected?
Oh, sure. There's lots of times in training where stuff goes wrong. Yeah, a specific moment, I don't know. I've also had moments where we were trying out a move. We went to do something and it might have even been a real basic thing, like a pinning combination or something. But it was the first time that we were trying it out, and accidentally I kicked the other person in the face. Like stuff like that happens. Yeah, I've been lucky to not really get too banged up yet. I'm sure it's coming, but yeah, there have been times in training too where Sledge and I try stuff out with each other. Sometimes there was a move that we wanted to experiment with and see if it was going to work, and maybe other people were not comfortable enough taking it, so then I end up having to be the person who takes the move from Sledge. And one of the bad parts about wrestling with your brother is that sometimes he's going to go a little harder on you than he might with somebody else, because I'm his brother, so he knows like, well, even if he gets mad at me, like who cares? Like we're gonna yell at each other for a second and then we're gonna be over it. We have that kind of brother relationship. But so he's definitely in training. He's hit me a few times with some things where it really take it easy there, pal. But I can't really think of I don't think I've ever done the flipping senton and knee myself in the face. But I also don't do a lot of flipping sentons. That's why. Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome, man. So it was like, is Sledge more of a like introvert or like extrovert as far as communicating? Because I know I had gone in and seen you guys at DOA and kind of gone by the merchandise stands and whatnot, and he just kind of just seems to just be there a little bit. Is that like his typical personality?
Yes. I think that he's a little bit of both. I think when you get to know Sledge, he's very outgoing. He was always kind of the class clown in school. I think he's a natural entertainer. I do think that kind of in his private time, he is a little bit of an introvert, doesn't like to go out a lot and socialize. So yeah, he's a little bit that way. Certainly, I think I am the more social of the two of us.
Mhm.
And I think I have a little bit more experience performing in front of people. Also, I had kind of it wasn't good, but when I was in high school, we had kind of a silly rap group, and we would make our own music videos, and it was kind of a comedy thing.
Mhm.
But we actually performed at venues and stuff sometimes, so I have a little more experience doing that kind of thing. Sledge does the Twitch, so he's very good when he's streaming, being entertaining, on his
Mhm.
streams.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's a little bit more introverted. But if you get to know him, he's very funny. He can be very outgoing. You just kind of have to crack that shell a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had actually seen a video on I think Ricky Gibson or Eddie Pearl, one of them on Twitter, posted about OPWS, and it kind of showed this video of everybody kind of lining up against the ropes, and then you guys were doing alternates, you know, and like, how does it feel to kind of be in that line and then having to know exactly like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this, like jump over the person, go into the ropes,
Mm-hmm.
like coordinating that. How does that feel, like knowing what you want to do when you have to perform, I guess?
Yeah. It's fine. It's just one of those things where, when you do you're practicing spots like that, or you're doing a spot in a match and it's a sequence of things. I'm the type of person that I'm just going over it in my head, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. I just do that a few times. I'm pretty good about remembering to do things. You just, I have to kind of go over it a few times. I will say that even in training, when we're doing those kinds of drills, like you saw, I get nervous for training. Like, it's not just the shows, but I think both Sledge and I are perfectionists, and it's really important to me, even in training, to practice how you play and to nail the spots, even in training, even though there's nobody, there are no fans, obviously they're watching you, but I'm always trying to be at my best. So even at training, where we're going through those drills and stuff, I get nervous. Like when we drive up to the school, it's about a 2-hour drive for us from Lincoln City up to Hillsboro. And on the drive up there, I'm going through in my head, I'm going through all of the things that we might be doing at training, and I'm trying to like mentally prepare for that. So even at training, you're doing basic drills, the bumping and stuff. I get nervous about it because I want to impress everybody there and to nail the bumps and feel good about it. Because kind of like sports or really anything else, it's sort of a what have you done for me lately kind of thing. And even if I was bumping great 2 weeks ago and I was doing some awesome moves and spots and things 2 weeks ago, well, if today I screw it all up, that's what people remember. So I'm always trying to be on top of my game. And because of that, I think it can be a little stressful, wrestling, because you always want to be at your best. So even doing those drills and stuff, I'm kind of like a little bit of a nervous wreck sometimes. I need to learn to chill out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw one video with Zay, and he was actually doing like the pump up kicks, and
Uh-huh.
Flex had actually like gone up and kind of like yelled at somebody a little bit to, you know, get it in motion, you
Mhm.
know. And it's like does that ever scare you a little bit to like be in training and then know that people are watching you and like they're critiquing you, and if you screw up, like kind of having that like, oh crap, like they're gonna notice when I mess up?
Yeah, it doesn't scare me. I have a good relationship with all the trainers. I think that both Sledge and I, we have a background playing sports. Both of us played football, basketball, and baseball since we were little, basically all through high school. So we're used to having coaches who are kind of critiquing you and maybe yelling at you when you screw up, that kind of stuff. Um, I think both of us, because of our sports background, we're pretty disciplined guys. So when we're in training, we're paying attention. We're working hard. We're trying to do things the right way. So I don't think we ever give trainers a lot of reason to yell at us. And if you screw up, you screw up. I think for both of us, as I mentioned, we're both perfectionists. We're both very critical of ourselves. So I don't think there's anything anybody else could say to us that we're not already thinking. Like when we screw up, we know we screwed up, and we're more mad at ourselves than anybody else could be at us.
Yeah.
So that part doesn't really scare me. It's more just, I think, for me, the pressure of being perfect all the time. And you know, I'm far from perfect, but the goal is to be as good as you possibly can be. So every little thing, even if it's a move that I'm not going to do in matches, because we have a pretty specific style that we use on shows. Even if it's a move that I'm not really going to use on shows, I still feel the pressure of nailing the move so that I can prove to everybody there that I can do it. And yeah, we're hard on ourselves. So I don't worry too much about, you know, letting trainers down or anything. And all the trainers are great. Yeah, they're going to get on you sometimes about certain things, but it's because they want the best for you. They want you to be good. And you know, the trainers at Oregon Pro Wrestling School are terrific, and I love all of them. We've had an awesome experience with all of them. So yeah, it doesn't scare me. And you know, if they yell at me too much, then we might have to hit our finisher on them. For real.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, one thing I wanted to bring up to you is so the first time that I ever saw you guys in Independence at DOA, I had actually had like a group of people that I had told, like, hey, you have to go and check out pro wrestling for the first time, you know, go and check it out. And they had known about AEW, WWE, and whatnot. And when they saw Sledge, they actually thought that it was really cool that there's a big man in pro wrestling, because like you don't typically see that, especially in WWE and AEW. So it is very refreshing to see where it's like it doesn't matter about that. So like I just wanted to say that, just in case there's that feeling, you know what I mean? And like all of us fans are like, hell yeah, like that is freaking awesome to actually know that you can still do it. It doesn't matter about any of that. You know, it's all about your performance. So
absolutely. And he so I think, like you said, you don't see it as much anymore. I think that there was a time where there were a lot of big guys who wrestled. You know, and some of them are more like muscle bound bodybuilder types, but there were heavy guys like Sledge too. And I think it really fits what we do, because our whole characters, our gimmick, it's kind of a throwback, right, to the kind of the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s sort of era, where it was a lot more colorful and character driven and gimmicky. And that's kind of the era that we're trying to capture with what we do. So I think it's nice that he's this big guy, and we're doing kind of a throwback sort of thing. And so, you know, when I look at him, I think of, and I'm sure others do too, you know, Yokozuna. He has that kind of size. Earthquake, guys like that, Tugboat / Typhoon. So I think that's nice that it's you know, again, kind of a nod to the big guys of the past, but also our style is pretty simple. And so I think that works for him, because he's a big guy and we try to treat him like a big guy. You know, you're not going to see Sledge doing springboards and hurricane and things like that.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we've wrestled some guys already who pitch things like that for Sledge. They want him to do the style that you kind of see more now, which is a little more spotty, you know, that kind of AEW style, indie style, where it's a lot more spot to spot, a lot of stunts and kind of fancy things. And we're a little bit more old school with our approach, where we try to, you know, really no pun intended, hammer home the gimmick and just be entertaining. And you know, our in-ring style, we we try to just execute the basics really well and, be theatrical. And that's kind of where the entertainment value comes from with us. But, you're not going to see us doing a lot of fancy high flying moves. And then, in Sledge's case, it's because he's not capable of doing that. But it also it doesn't make sense. We've seen big guys who are very athletic and can do some of those things. But we were, Ricky Gibson, Eddie Pearl, Malcolm Flex, those guys, in a lot of ways, they have kind of an old school approach. And so we have, obviously learned from them, and we appreciate that. If you have somebody who's really big, who's doing, moonsaults and things like that, then it almost kind of, when you see a small guy do it, now it doesn't mean so much. It was like, well, the guy who weighs 150 pounds did it, but the guy who weighs 350 pounds could do it. So why do I care about the 150-pound guy doing it? So some of it is just being mindful of the overall show, the other wrestlers. If Sledge could get up to the top rope and do a moonsault, it would blow everybody away. But it also, it kind of takes away from the guys who do that style normally. So we try to have him wrestle like a big guy, because to us that makes the most sense. And to your point, I think it's awesome that he's doing that, and I hope that he can be an inspiration to wrestling fans out there who maybe are bigger people and feel like their weight is something that's going to prevent them from trying it. Don't worry about that. Believe me, Sledge in training, there were a lot of things that he wasn't just physically was not able to do, but you figure out ways around that, and you figure out things that will work for you. A lot of the basic stuff in training, kind of going back to your earlier question about when we first showed up to training and having to prep Sledge for, what to expect. I told him that I was kind of surprised when I had first started training that there are a lot of kind of gymnastics movements involved. So that first day you're doing rolls and stuff, and some of it is a little bit fancy, even for a guy like me who's fairly athletic. The first time I had to do kind of the back roll where you kind of pop up onto your hands. It's almost like you're going from the ground up and do like a backflip and landing on your feet. First time somebody showed me that and they said, "Hey, you got to do this." I was like, "There's no way I'm going to do that. I've never done anything like that in my life." I'm athletic, but I played a lot of, ball sports, football, basketball, baseball. You weren't doing any movements like that. So I was like, there's no way I could do that. With some practice, I figured it out. Sledge still isn't going to be doing any backflips up onto his feet, but there are ways around that. I think that the trainers at our school, at least, were understanding that Sledge is too big for that kind of stuff, so they figured out other things for him to do. So again, for anybody out there who sees Sledge and they go, "Man, that's awesome that a guy that big is doing this thing," don't feel like you can't do it just because you feel like you're heavier, you're out of shape. The other thing is, go to Oregon Pro Wrestling School. They'll get you in better shape, trust me, because there's a lot of cardio stuff involved there.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, so give me 1 second just to damn stupid thing. Okay. One question I wanted to ask you is, like, I get that you guys are able to communicate as a unit, obviously so well because you guys are brothers, but obviously being a tag team. Is there a tag team in which you guys look for and you guys are like, we want to kind of do that, we want to bring those aspects to pro wrestling?
Sure. We have a lot of influences, and we kind of draw from many different tag teams, very specific things. I'll start with our trainers, the Midnight Heat, Ricky Gibson, Eddie Pearl. They do a lot of things in the ring that we try to kind of emulate. I mean, we do it our own way. Obviously, we have a very different dynamic because I'm, an average to smaller guy, and then Sledge is a huge guy. So we obviously can't do all of the things that Ricky and Eddie do. But for them, they mostly now wrestle as heels, and they do a lot of things as heels that we try to kind of copy and make our own. For example, they try to, as heels, get in there and do things that will sort of make them the butt of the joke. So for example, they like to do spots where they go for something, a double team move, and they miss. The guy gets out of the way, and then Ricky and Eddie run into each other. They hit each other. Really simple spot, but I think it's effective, and it's something that always gets a reaction from the crowd. So Sledge and I have kind of used that as heels, wrestling at DOA. Recently, I don't know if it was the last match we wrestled there, or maybe the match before that. We had a moment in the match where somebody was pinning me, and then Sledge came over to make the save. Guy moves out of the way, Sledge splashes me. Gets a huge reaction because here this 500-pound guy just came down on top of his brother, and we're bad guys, so they should like that. So we use that. We take that from them, and just kind of their philosophy that as heels, you want to try to get heat. You want to try to get the crowd to boo you. You want to get them to cheer the babyface team. I think you see too often in wrestling, you see heels that are, kind of selfishly just trying to get themselves over, getting a babyface kind of reaction and doing things that are too cool. And it's a tricky thing because you don't want to go out there and be, so boring that the crowd just isn't interested in watching you. But you also don't want to be so cool that the crowd's going to start cheering for you, because that's the opposite of what you want. You want them to hate you. You want them to cheer for the babyface team. So that's kind of a philosophy that they have that we've adopted. We think that they're really good with just overall psychology, whether it's storytelling in the ring, out of the ring, whatever it is. They're a huge influence on us, obviously, because they're our trainers. As far as like, wrestlers from WWE, that kind of thing. We kind of grew up with, during the Attitude Era. So obviously a lot of influences there. The Dudley Boys are a big influence of ours. And I think you see that. I'll point out a few things here and you'll probably go, whoa, maybe you already noticed it, but we have a move that we call the wheelbarrow, which is a thing where basically we do kind of like a human wheelbarrow thing, like a wheelbarrow race that you might see where one person is holding the other person's legs and they're walking on their hands. So we do that. That's kind of a theatrical setup. And we kind of go around in a semicircle, and then Sledge picks me up in like a wheelbarrow lift, and I splash the guy on the ground. When we set up for that, Sledge pushes me in the chest and goes, "Jack, load the wheelbarrow." And that's Devon, get the tables. So that's where that came from. So we're taking something that we liked from a team that we idolized, and we're making it our own. The wheelbarrow itself, it's the worm. It's Scotty 2 Hotty's worm, but we turned it into a construction thing because it's the same kind of motion going around the ring. It's very theatrical. The actual move that we hit is not really that big of a move, kind of like how Scotty does this whole WORM, and then he just kind of like hits the guy with a, fist drop, elbow, whatever it was that he did there. And then, also inspiration from the People's Elbow, another move, very basic move, but he made it so theatrical and so cool with all of the antics beforehand. That was an inspiration again for the wheelbarrow. We haven't used this a whole lot yet. When we turned heel at DOA, we used the hard hats. We did double headbutts to Konami code. And we did, I headbutted CJ Edwards, Sledge headbutted Air Jordan. But, our idea is that maybe in the future we could double headbutt the same person. And again, that's our concerto, Edge and Christian concerto. But we're using the hard hats as kind of a signature weapon. So again, we're trying to be, a little bit innovative and unique, but we're drawing inspiration from wrestlers that we watched, and we're just figuring out ways to not just completely rip people off, but see something that we like and figure out a way to make it our own, because virtually everything has been done in wrestling. Like you might think, oh, I have this great idea for this move. I promise you somebody somewhere has done that move.
Yeah.
Or done a version of it that's so close that it's basically the same thing. So
yeah,
it's at this point, people have been wrestling for so long. It's really hard to come up with something that's completely original that works. We had some ideas in training for some moves that we wanted to do. And we tried them out for months and months and months, and we just couldn't do it. Couldn't figure out how to do it safely. whatever it was, make it look good. And so when you come up with a move like that and you have never seen it done before, like when we come up with an idea, we will look all over the internet. We'll try to see if anybody has done it. And some of that is to see like if we can figure out any tips for how to do it effectively. Like, oh, if this person has done this move, well, how did they pull it off? But if you come up with something and you can't find it anywhere, there's probably a reason nobody has ever done it. It's because it can't be done safely or effectively. So other inspirations, I would say just kind of any team during that era that I'm talking about. I mean, Attitude Era, and then going back to kind of the early to mid 90s when it was very colorful, very over the top. Obviously, we have kind of an occupational gimmick, which was very popular in the early to mid 90s. So I would say like IRS comes to mind. I know it's a different kind of gimmick, but again, just kind of an occupational thing where here this guy is like a tax collector. The Undertaker, even originally, that was an occupational gimmick. I mean, so there's inspiration there. Just any of those things where somebody had a job. Like it's such a great, and some of them work better than others. We felt like the construction thing worked really well because it's this blue collar thing, so it's sort of like an everyman kind of gimmick, average Joe sort of thing that the average person can relate to. It's sort of this tough guy sort of job. So that was, we're trying to be kind of hyper masculine, super macho wrestler guys, because that's again the era that we're trying to capture. And as we're coming up with the gimmick, there are just so many elements to it. It's so open-ended, whether it's using tools as weapons or naming moves after pieces of heavy equipment or whatever it is. There's just so much you can do with it. So I'm glad that we ran with this gimmick. I will say this. I don't want to go on forever because we have so many influences, but one guy who influences like everything we do is The Rock. The Rock was always our favorite when we were growing up. And I think you see that in like our promo style. We do a lot of catchphrases. And The Rock was all about those catchphrases. We really liked how that allowed him to connect with the live audience. And we just kind of imagined, man, if we can get some of these catchphrases over and the crowd is chanting along with us like that, it's such a great feeling when the crowd starts to catch on to your catchphrases and now they're finishing them for you, they're saying them along with you. So he's a huge influence for us both, as whether we're doing babyface stuff or heel stuff. And I tell people this all the time. I find myself doing things that The Rock did without even thinking about it, even just mannerisms and the way that he moved in the ring. For example, when he went to like stomp somebody, he would do this thing. I don't know if you can picture it, where he would kind of like shake his leg before he stomped him. And I just naturally do that because I grew up watching him do it and I grew up, imitating him. So he's a huge influence. I know that like our gimmick, we don't, it's very different with what we do, but I think just the fact that we're so into doing promos and being charismatic and that kind of stuff, that was all The Rock because he was our favorite. So
yeah, that is freaking crazy.
I'm trying to think if there's any other because I always thought that people would find it interesting when we, revealed, well, the wheelbarrow, well, that's kind of like the worm. And people go, oh, yeah, duh. Like you even do the same kind of semicircle around the ring. Trying to think of other things that there's more. I'll think of more, but there's so many like elements that we use where it's inspired by something that a wrestler did in the past. This last weekend at POW, we did a promo before the match, and we're trying to get over this new thing where we chant boom. So for context, like in this promo, we were basically listing things. We're cutting a promo on the guys we're wrestling and we're tearing them apart and we're doing a list. And at the end of each thing, whoever's talking, we say the thing, and then the other guy says boom, and then boom, 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 and boom, boom, boom. That's kind of our what chant. That's the Stone Cold what chant. And it's just a way to kind of, a rhythmic sort of thing that will hopefully get the crowd involved. and also kind of inspired by the yes chant. You know, we were fans of Daniel Bryan, and we thought the yes chant was so brilliant, the simplicity of it. We really liked, you know, the hand motion, so that visual of the crowd all doing that in unison. We're trying to kind of do that with our hammer thing. So just there are so many parts of our gimmick, what we do, where we're, you know, drawing inspiration from wrestlers that we liked, that we watched growing up.
That is freaking awesome. Yeah, one thing I actually wanted to bring up to you was I had actually commented on that Boom promo, and I think it was at like 1 o'clock in the morning or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, not to get like too personal, but you know, I was going through a time, you know, during that period, and you know that's what was keeping me up. And then I saw that promo, and like it brought a smile to my face. Like I just started laughing, and it's like, how does it feel being a performer and not knowing what somebody is going through personally, but knowing that you can bring them out of that state by them watching you perform?
Yeah, I mean, that's everything. That's why you perform. Um, it's so gratifying to know that you're having a positive impact on people. I think that's why we do it. I mean, it's fun to have that attention and stuff, but you know, you love to see people smile. And even as heels, you know, it's all part of the show, and you know that even when somebody hates you, that you're doing your job, and it's making them hopefully love the good guys even more. So yeah, just knowing that you're having an impact is awesome. At this level, sometimes you feel like nobody's watching you. So thank you. It's nice to know that some people are out there actually watching some of our videos and stuff, because we do, you know, we don't have a lot of money and resources right now. Obviously, we don't have, you know, WWE, AEW level production, but you know, we do what we can with what we have, and we do put a lot of effort and thought into it. And I spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, how we might do a promo or do a skit or whatever it is. Spend a lot of time thinking about our matches, you know, how to structure it so that it makes sense and that it will get the crowd involved and all that kind of stuff. So no, it feels good. I just, you know, and I love hearing from fans too. So any fans who are watching this, feel free to message us, contact us, comment, like, because we love hearing about that stuff. It's so cool and really surreal when fans post pictures that they've taken with you. You know, it kind of makes you feel like a celebrity or something, which is weird. Just recently we had a fan do some artwork of us, which was a first for us. We hadn't had anybody, you know, draw a picture of us. And again, that was something that I think both Sledge and I did as kids. We were both kind of artsy, and I would, you know, go to the store and get some markers or some colored pencils and some poster board. And I would have all over my room, I'd have pictures of my favorite wrestlers, my favorite athletes. I liked drawing them. So we had a fan do some really cool artwork of us where we were like on a lunchbox and a thermos, and it was a surreal moment. And we had met this fan at a show. She had done a sign for us too that was really cool that said "It's hammer time," and it looked like a, you know, like a wooden plank with nails in it. And you know, when fans show up and they have signs and they're wearing your t-shirts and your vests and stuff and your hard hats, it's that will never get old to me. I always thought it was weird when celebrities, and not that we're celebrities yet, but when they act like, you know, you're an inconvenience to them when you ask them for an autograph or something. I don't know how that will ever get old. And obviously we're not at a level of fame as like a real celebrity, but anybody coming up to us for an autograph or a picture, like, it feels good every single time. And we love making people happy. And if they're going through stuff in their life, as you mentioned, and we can be kind of a distraction from that, that's awesome. And I think Sledge and I both really enjoy that, and getting that reaction, meeting the fans, signing autographs. You know, I think we have a gimmick that really appeals to kids, and it's awesome when kids come out to the show and they're so excited to see us and they want us to sign their posters and they want to buy the t-shirts and stuff. It's that's really cool, because it makes me think of when we were kids and we we were watching wrestling. So hopefully we can be part of the reason why this next generation falls in love with wrestling.
That is freaking awesome, man. That is so awesome. So, I know you had brought up earlier that Ricky Gibson and Eddie Pearl kind of taught you guys the old school way of professional wrestling.
Sure.
So, what would you say, in your own words, would be the difference between the old school part of wrestling and what we typically see today in pro wrestling?
Yeah. Well, I think when you watch older wrestling, certainly the level of difficulty has increased tremendously, just in terms of the moves, the level of athleticism it takes to perform some of these spots. You watch AEW and it's there's a lot of stunts and things that are just, you're going, man, I don't know how that guy's able to do that. The flips in the air and jumping out of the ring and all the things they do. You don't see as much of that, I think, in older wrestling. It was a little more basic. You had a lot more, guys would just get in there and actually wrestle. At times it looked a little more like amateur wrestling. So I think, to me, the difference is just that older wrestling, at least the way that we have been taught, is more focused on the psychology and the storytelling and sort of a less is more approach. And that's, there are always exceptions. I watch matches from 20, 30, 40 years ago where you're thinking, okay, well, the old school style is more psychology, less fancy moves. And I'll watch matches and the psychology is horrible. It doesn't make any sense. So, it's not true all the time, but I think that the idea back then was to kind of tell more of a story and to just keep it kind of basic and fundamental, but execute those things well, as opposed to doing a lot of fancy stuff where there's a lot of high risk. If you mess up, it's either going to look really bad, you could possibly get hurt. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that new style. I think that's the great thing about wrestling. There's something for everybody. What appeals to us may not necessarily appeal to somebody else, and that's fine. They can enjoy a different style of wrestling. Totally cool. But for us, I think that kind of old school approach, that less is more, kind of get the most out of basic stuff. So for example, I'll give you an example with us. We like to do kind of a double team sequence in our matches that we kind of call it hammer time, because that's what I yell out before we do it. But we basically get our opponent in the corner and I do some double axe handles, like overhead, coming down on the guy's head. And I do 1, 2, 3, guy falls to his butt, and it's kind of visually, it's supposed to be kind of like we're hammering a nail, right? And we're driving him down into the mat, and then we pick him back up. I tag Sledge in, he gets in, he does the same thing. 1, 2, 3, he tags me back in, he'll trap the guy's arms. I come off the second rope with another big double axe handle. So again, all we're doing is double axe handles, about the most basic move you could ever do. But the crowd goes nuts for it because of the theatricality. I call for it. It's hammer time. I'm doing the hammer thing. We're just really big and over the top with it. When I get up to the middle rope and before I drop the big, diving double axe handle, I yell out, "When you're a hammer," and Sledge says, "Everybody looks like a nail." The crowd says it along with you. So again, like, we're not doing some kind of crazy flippy move, but the crowd's into it because we're showing that charisma. We're trying to establish that connection with the crowd. So again, we're getting a lot out of just very basic stuff, and there's not a lot of risk for getting injured there. It's a very, very simple move, versus doing dives to the outside of the ring where there's potential to get hurt. There's potential to hurt the guy who's supposed to be catching you, hurt fans if you overshoot it. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that style. There are guys who do that and they do it very well. I think for us, we probably would not be able to execute that style as well. And I think that there's a lot that goes into it. As I said before, I'm 33. Sledge just turned 31. So we're not really spring chickens in terms of, wrestling. A lot of guys get started in their early 20s, sometimes even younger than that. We got into it a little bit later, and because we're getting a little older, we're not in our 20s anymore. We'd like to be able to do it for as long as we can, so we're really mindful of our bodies, and if we want to have that longevity, we need to take care of ourselves. And I think that we can be an effective act without doing those high risk maneuvers. So that's why the old school style kind of appeals to us. We wrestle a lot of guys who do kind of the more modern style, where it's going to be fancier moves, maybe trickier spots, where it's more of a sequence of, okay, this guy does this thing, then this, then this, and this. And it's a lot to remember. Some guys don't like that either. They kind of like to go in there and just kind of improvise a little bit more, which Sledge and I, we can adjust. That's kind of part of wrestling. You're going to wrestle different people who have different styles, and you have to make the adjustments and make it work for both of you. But we've wrestled guys who like to, plan out the entire match. We've wrestled guys who like to call absolutely nothing beforehand and just kind of call it in the ring. We prefer to at least have kind of an outline before we go out there. Because especially when you're new, when you're green, it can be a little bit scary to go out there in front of people and have to wrestle a match against guys that you really don't know that well. You're not super familiar with what they do, and you have no plan ahead of time. That can be a little bit daunting, because you're going out there, you want to put on a good performance, and if you go out there and you have no idea what you're going to be doing, that can be a little scary. So Sledge and I like to have a little bit of a plan at least. But again, that's kind of the old school versus modern, where I think because you're doing fancier stuff typically with this more modern indie style, whatever you want to call it, there's a little more planning involved, because it's pretty difficult to just call it in the ring when you're needing a guy to duck this and go off there, and you know what to do in every single situation. But when you're first starting out, it's a little scary when you go out there and like, what are we doing?
Yeah, well, that is awesome. So one thing, I apologize. One thing I wanted to bring up to you was, I know the last time that you guys were in Independence for DOA, you guys didn't have your guys' merchandise table out. And that was something that I had kind of realized was you guys almost got more of a bigger pop because of the fact that fans weren't seeing you just wandering around.
Sure.
And to me, that is like my only critique of DOA, is that we see the wrestlers walking around, and it almost takes away from when they actually step out of the curtain and have the fans see them. You know what I mean? And it's like, that was just something I realized when I saw you, and I was like, why isn't that more commonly seen?
Sure. I 100% agree with you. I think that there is certainly such a thing as overexposure. And it's a weird thing, because we have people, especially as baby faces, you want to go out there and sell your merchandise. And for us, at this level, full disclosure, you don't make a ton of money. So if we're going to make money at all, it's typically with our merchandise sales. And there have been, times where we've done pretty well with the merch table. So that's been nice. So, but there's kind of this balance between going out there, mingling with the fans, which you certainly, on one hand you want to do that, but you also don't want to be out there so much that, like you say, you start to seem like just another person, right? We're trying to present ourselves as being these larger than life characters. And so going out there and just kind of walking around like you're just whoever, we don't like that. We try not to do that. Sometimes these companies, they put some pressure on you to go out there and sell your merch, because mingling with the fans is just another way to make that connection with the audience, and hopefully they'll come back and watch more shows, and maybe what does it for them is being able to meet the wrestlers and get an autograph. And but I agree with what you say. There are times for different companies that we've wrestled for where we notice that other wrestlers, say during intermission, they're not even out at their merch table selling merch. They're just kind of walking around the venue. Sometimes they're not even in gimmick. They don't have their their outfits on. We don't like that. We try to stay in character, because I think that that makes the show better. It's kind of like if you were watching a movie and all of a sudden the actor breaks character and now he's himself for a second. It takes you out of it. I know that wrestling can be quite ridiculous, but there's that suspension of disbelief, right? We have to, within this world of wrestling, kayfabe, you want to, stay in character. And so that overexposure, that's something that we're constantly thinking about. So as heels, here's another kind of issue. Do you go out there and sell merch as a heel? Doesn't make a lot of sense. You're bad guys, right? You don't want to be out there mingling with fans. For us, it's kind of a tough thing. So we didn't have merch at the last independence show. Some of that, which Sledge might have mentioned in our pre-match promo, is that we typically don't sell a lot of merch in independence. So for those of us who have come to the shows, our merch table is a pretty elaborate setup. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it, but we have our own table. We have our own, we've got the delineator post, the big orange cones that we put out front. We got all kinds of gimmicks. We try to make it, very construction looking. So we put quite a bit of effort into it, and it takes a little bit to set all that up. So we figure, okay, we're heels, so we don't really need to be selling merch. And if we're gonna put all that time into setting up the table and not sell any merch at all, is it really worth it? So we thought, okay, we won't set up our table, and we'll make something out of it, right? We'll come out for the promo and we'll say, oh, the reason we aren't selling our merchandise tonight is because we don't want you hillbillies from Independence wearing our merch out in public. So you turn it into something. But yeah, I think that's, I wish you could tell some of the other wrestlers that, because it does drive me nuts. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine where I see a wrestler sitting in the crowd watching the other matches. It just kind of,
it takes away from it.
Absolutely. You wouldn't see, we try to, I know that this is, independent wrestling. You're sometimes wrestling in front of 25 people, whatever. But we try to be as professional as possible, and it's good practice because, hopefully we can continue to advance and go wrestle for some bigger companies one day in front of more people. And you want to have those good habits. Like I wouldn't, I don't anticipate this is going to happen, but let's say the Hammer Brothers made it to WWE one day. Would we be going out and sitting in the crowd when it's not our turn to wrestle? No, you don't see that, and it would completely take you out of it. So, we just try to have that same mindset, at this level. And some of it too is that somebody, I don't know who it was, but somebody mentioned this to me years ago, actually. They said, you know why the ring is elevated the way it is? It's because when you guys are in the ring, you're going to look bigger to the audience that's sitting down below. You're up high. You're going to look larger than life. You're going to look even bigger than you are. So, I always kind of kept that in the back of my mind, that if we spend a lot of time on the floor around fans and they're up close, they're going to see how big you really are. And suddenly you don't maybe look so imposing. Now, that's never going to happen with Sledge. He's a pretty big guy. But, there's some of that too, where you just, like I say, you don't want too much of that overexposure. You want people to feel like it's a real treat to see you. And, if you just act like you're just another person, just an average guy, then, people might look at you that way. And we want to present ourselves as being these big, larger than life characters. So I agree with you 100%. I think that's something where all the wrestlers in the area could probably be better about maintaining some of that distance.
Yeah.
And I think the show would be better off.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you before we actually end up cutting everything out is how does it feel to mostly be a heel gimmick, but you guys are getting so over that the fans are actually liking your gimmick. So you guys are almost becoming these anti-heroes. How does that feel?
It's tough because, as I said before, as heels, you want to be hated. Now, for DOA fans out there, if DOA is kind of the only company in the area that you watch, everywhere else that we wrestle, we are baby faces. So the heel thing is unusual for us. And when we first found out about it, we were a little bit apprehensive because I think we only had a couple matches maybe in DOA so far, and we felt like we were just starting to get rolling a little bit. We were starting to get the crowd behind us. I think we did our first like live promo when we came out. Oh, that's so another influence. The whole coming out and doing the promo before the match. That's our New Age Outlaws. They came out and did the you didn't know, did the promo on the way to the ring. You don't get a lot of promo time at indie wrestling shows, so we figured, well, if we're gonna talk at all, which is one of our strong suits, we think, we're gonna have to do it during the entrance. So that's why we do that. But anyway, we're baby faces everywhere else. So the heel thing was a little different. And at first we thought, oh man, should we do this? Like, but we're new. We want to do what the promoters and the bookers ask of us. And we just looked at it as an opportunity to prove that we can be versatile. Because there'll be times in the future where, a booker is going to want us to turn heel, to be heels, and we need the practice. And we just thought, we knew that it was going to be difficult because we anticipated that some of the fans would still cheer for us. And we've seen that so far, where I know up in Portland, when we wrestle for DOA, when our music hits, we get a pop. So we come out through the curtain and we just do our best to try to turn the fans with our promo. I think that's one nice thing about coming out and talking on the way to the ring. Sledge did a really funny promo last month, I believe, where the music hits. We can hear from behind the curtain, the crowd's popping, it's a babyface reaction. So he comes out and Sledge kind of does oh, yay, the Hammer Brothers. We love the Hammer Brothers. Shut up. Does one of those, which again, that was kind of based on a promo that The Rock did years ago, because, again, The Rock, when he turned heel, when he was kind of doing the Hollywood Rock thing, a lot of people didn't like it. They didn't, for, wrestling fans, for whatever reason, they didn't like that he went off to Hollywood and started making movies. So when he came back, they booed him. But still, a lot of the fans, you can't help but cheer The Rock. He's so entertaining. So even as a heel, he's getting that kind of babyface reaction, at least from, a portion of the fans. And so he would do the same kind of thing where he would just turn that back against them and make fun of them. So we try to do that. We do the best we can with it. I'm torn because you want to get that white hot heat, where the crowd just really hates your guts. That's a heel's dream. I don't know that we're ever going to get that. Some of it is you got to have a good baby face too for the fans to get behind. But I'm also, at some point I imagine they'll turn us babyface again. So when that happens, it's nice that the crowd, you can tell that the crowd is receptive already to what we're doing. So when we turn babyface, hopefully we get a really big reaction and the crowd will be ready for it, and they'll go nuts when we turn babyface. So it's, there are pros and cons to it. It's nice to get any reaction at all. The worst thing you could have happen is you go out there and it's just crickets. They don't hate you. They don't love you. They're just completely indifferent to you. We get a reaction, whether it's good or bad, every time we go out there. So we feel very fortunate. We feel like we're doing enough to elicit some kind of response. But we just, we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to be. It's really interesting to be doing heel in one place and babyface in another. And, doing that simultaneously is kind of weird, because the first time that I did wrestling, I had kind of been told that, okay, if you're going to be baby faces, you got to be baby faces everywhere you go. You got to keep it consistent, because we're trying to, keep kayfabe here. That doesn't really seem to be a thing anymore. So, we're in the kayfabe is dead era. But, if the promoter or the booker asks you to do something, we want to, they're paying us to do a job. So we want to do what they want. They're trying to tell a story, and we're, we're chess pieces on the board, and we need to help them tell that story. So we try not to, make too much of a stink about it, even if the idea is something that we're kind of like, I don't know. But the heel babyface thing, let me tell you, it's interesting, especially in the era of social media, because sometimes on social media, if we're interacting with other DOA wrestlers, then we're being scumbags on social media. But then when we're interacting with wrestlers for a different promotion where we're baby faces, suddenly we're nice guys. So it's tough because we're using the same account, and it's that part kind of stinks, that you are essentially breaking character because you're a good guy some of the time, you're a bad guy, for these other companies. So
yeah,
that part's unfortunate, but you just do the best you can.
Well, I just want to thank you a lot, man, for actually joining me here today. It has been an absolute pleasure to sit here and talk with you. It is so awesome.
Thank you for having me. It's really cool. This is one of those moments, like I said, kind of like fans wanting to take a picture with you, whatever. Having somebody ask you to do a podcast is kind of like, what? Somebody wants to talk to me? That's pretty cool. So thank you for having me. It's awesome.
Yeah, that is so freaking awesome, man. All right, man. Well, I hope you have a good night, and I hope to see you soon.
Okay, sounds good, Cody. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right, you guys. So that was Interesting's podcast interview with Jack Hammer. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, and ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And remember, June 2nd, Interesting Podcast is going to be interviewing Hotshot Spencer Scott. This is going to be another interview you guys are not going to want to miss. So make sure you guys hit that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content.